This will be a video response to Jesus Freak 77's video titled, Is an Atheist's Life Easier? Jesus Freak has asked atheists why they don't accept the existence of a God, more specifically the Judeo-Christian God, which is the one he believes in. And he's gotten two answers. One is that there isn't enough proof or evidence to suggest that such a God exists, and the second is that it makes their lives easier. I personally have never heard the second answer from any atheists that I have talked to. So Jesus Freak says what I consider reasonably sound proof or evidence and what he might consider reasonably sound are two completely different things, and this is entirely subjective. And you know what? You're right. It is. But the thing is that what I consider reasonable proof and evidence and what you might consider reasonable may be different, but one achieves results and one doesn't. And keeping in mind, Jesus Freak, this is not the atheist in me that's saying this, but rather the empiricist. And why do I stick with the empiricist's way of thinking rather than yours? Well, because it has a proven track record of success, that examining things with an open, critical, unbiased mind tends to be the way to go rather than sticking to prayer, faith, and preconceived notions. Jesus Freak then uses Jupiter's existence and how Jupiter has a large gravitational field to pull objects away from the Earth's trajectory as proof that there's an intelligent designer trying to protect the Earth. Well, here's why I think your reasoning is flawed, Jesus Freak, and why I think that flawed reasoning is inherently dishonest, whether you know it to be or not. Even if what you said was true, how does that in any way prove the existence of your God? Of course, the way you start, meaning that you start off believing already that a God exists and you're just trying to find evidence to fill in the gap, is already a dishonest tactic to begin with. Not to mention that you are essentially making an argument from ignorance, meaning that just because you don't understand how Jupiter was formed and you don't understand exactly why the gravitational field of Jupiter works as it does, doesn't necessarily mean that a God did it. And, of course, I could also use this simplistic way of thinking right back against you and say, well, look at how inhospitable the rest of the solar system is compared to Earth. Do you really think that a smart God would put us in the middle of an entire solar system that can't support life and just put life on this one tiny little blue speck that he calls Earth? Not a very smart God, is he? To the second point, Jesus Freak asks us atheists if we were to apply the Bible to our lives as a moral guide, would our lives be easier or more difficult? And he says, oh, of course, it's going to be more difficult. This is where we must agree to disagree, Jesus Freak, because the first thing I have to say is I think, by far, living your life always questioning what's around you, whether it's through science, through morality and law, etc., is much more difficult. It requires much more thought, much more introspection, much more examination. And it requires just overall more thinking than just following what everyone tells you to do. How hard is it to apply the Bible to your life? Not hard at all. Do you know why? Because the Bible contradicts itself so much and sends so many conflicting messages that people just tend to pick and choose what they want to apply to their own lives and say that it was from the Bible. And to be quite frank, Jesus Freak, I don't think that having an unmoving and stagnant moral standard like one set by your God is something to be proud of, because that doesn't reflect progress. And as I've said before, it is by far much more difficult for people to think to themselves and to come together and to examine society and change what we think is right and wrong, rather than just follow a written set of rules set by someone who claims to be all good and all-knowing. Well, what makes you so sure your God is all good anyways, other than, well, he said so. And to be honest, I'd rather be a fair, kind, and compassionate person by, for example, supporting homosexuality and homosexual rights, than being a bigot and earning my place in heaven by being a bigot. Do you know what I mean? May the truth always be heard.